Hey, welcome to episode 42 of Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. That's my opportunity that I take to listen to podcasts and reflect on my learning. This week's episode 42, starts off with Dave Schmittou. And Dave Schmittou is an educator out of, I believe, Florida, and how he has, a podcast where he talks about lasting learning. And there's a couple interviews that I listened with him at the beginning, and one that stands out to me is his interview with Tim Stevenson, and we go through the week. We listen to Mindset Monday with George Couros on the Innovators Mindset podcast, all the way through House of EdTech, Shooks and GIF, and all other manner of podcasts. And so I encourage you to stay, take a listen to what I got to say, and maybe you'll hear something that will spark your interest to go listen to those podcasters. And that's it. Yeah, the week ends with me rushing into a Pro D day, excited to share my understanding and learning of a tool that is near and dear to my heart. All right, hope you're having a good one, and thanks for listening. Stick around, share this with others. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
I'm Jake Miller from the Educational Duct Tape Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect those of others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. I'm your host, Brian Carpenter. Fresh Air at 5 is my regular attempt to exercise by walking about my neighborhood to take in podcast content, then reflect in an unedited video, which I finally post to my Twitter channel. This podcast will be a regular collection of the audio from these selfie videos. You can follow me on Twitter at FreshAirAtFive. Hey, PLN, it is Monday, my website, October 18, 2021, and I'm up here for Fresh Air at 5 this morning, just after 3 o'clock this morning, and I couldn't sleep, and I'm like, you know what, I should be productive and get up now. So I'm up, and it's not a rainy morning, which I was possibly expecting, and it's dry, and I thought, let's go for a walk. So I went for a walk, and I get to see my neighborhood like an hour and a half earlier than I typically do, which is pretty nifty, and I'll be home in time to get my son up for work so he can get out the door and head off to his job, where he leaves just after 5 a.m. So this morning, as I was out walking, I listened to Lasting Learning Podcast with Dave Schmittou. So this is a new podcast for me to listen to, and Dave Schmittou, I've been aware of you for a while and your engagement with Teach Better team, and I've listened to Teach Better Talk for for about a year and a half or so, and I stopped, but your name has come through that channel and has landed on my desk, but I haven't done anything about wondering more about who Dave Schmittou is other than your Teach Better guy. So Dave, thanks for your podcast. I came across it, came through, somebody had mentioned it on Twitter, and I'm like, hey, there's Dave Schmittou. I should listen. So Lasting Learning Podcast by Dave Schmittou. Go take a listen if you haven't. So this is a new one for me this week. And you had on guest Emily Pascal out of Sweet Home, Alabama, and how she is changing the world of education. So it was great to hear you talk about your travels and how you've gone through this space. I've never been to Alabama, never been to Florida, so I don't geographically know where these things are. But Emily is there, and she's making a difference in her elementary school. Interesting to hear her story of how she transitioned mid-year from one elementary school school to another, and how she talks about compassion and grit need to be signs of teachers in schools and students in schools. We need to teach that. I got some other stuff to say, so I'm coming right back. Hang on. One more thing for October 18th, 2021, on the heels of my first comments of about episode 194 of the Lasting Learning Podcast with Dave Schmittou and guest Emily Pascal out of Alabama. I like your comments, Emily, about how we need to be, culture bringers to our school space. And we need to not just bring morale, but we need to be infectious about the culture, and that kids matter, and that schools don't exist for teachers to have jobs. I've seen a lot of schools where that seems to be the case. And, the staff room conversation about students is pretty negative. And so we need to make sure that we are being positive, looking for the positive, and not labeling students so that we are determining their outcome and where they're going in their life, but that we believe in kids. Appreciate your comments, inspiring as I'm out walking this morning. And yes, thanks so much for the work that you're doing, Emily, where you're at. And I look forward to seeing your name in the future as you are a leader in education. Thanks, Dave Schmittou. Appreciate it. And we don't know each other yet, but maybe we will one day. Happy day. Bye-bye. One more thing for October 18th, 2021. Can you hear that? I'm out here walking and I hear geese flying in the sky in the middle of the night. Last night before I went to bed around 11:30, I heard geese flying in the sky. Craziest thing, it's dark and they're flying south, it seems like, because winter's coming here to Canada. All right, so that was my one little wonder and curious thing that I heard this morning. Another curious thing that I heard this morning. Episode 193. Of Lasting Learning Podcast. And Dave Schmittou, I remember now why your podcast came across my player. It was because Tim Stevenson, Astro Stevenson, was a guest on your podcast, and he mentioned it to me, and now I'm listening to your podcast, and I heard about Tim and his work that he is doing, and on Saturday morning, Tim and I sat down in a Starbucks in his town, near his house, and talked about life, and talked about education, and talked about technology, and we had a fantastic, nearly 2.5 hour conversation that morning that was just spur of the moment. Great guy. Tim's great. And people, if you're not following Tim Stevenson, you need to get on Twitter and Instagram and follow Astro Stevenson. So Tim's written this book. I read his book in the summer, and I'm a big advocate of Beyond the Classroom, Tim's education story, and how he has connected relevance with learning for students and bringing joy to his science and astronomy classes. Another one more thing for October 18th, 2021. I'm just listening to episode 193 of Lasting Learning Podcast with Dave Schmittou and guest Tim Stevenson, as Tim talks about his journey and about space and cool stuff. So take a listen to the end of our conversation and my reflection this morning. At the very end, his mic drop moment on episode 193 is, I've been teaching so long that I don't care anymore. And so you got to listen to the episode with Dave Schmittou and read his book to find out the answer to what that's about. Because you know what? Tim cares deeply. And for him to say that, there's got to be something a whole lot more than just, I don't care. So take a listen to what he has to say. And Tim, fantastic. You know, every time I get together with you and I hear you, I'm learning something new. This whole thing about that asteroid, or the comet that hit Jupiter in 1994, that was crazy. You know, like, I didn't know that. I know that. And I'm like, whew. And that's where the Earth Near Object Task Force, collision act, with asteroids and stuff like that is coming from. So I'm talking way too long. I'm going to have to chop this into 2 pieces. So there's going to be one more thing coming out of the end of this segment. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Dave. Have a fabulous day. And it's still earlier than I typically get out, and I'm almost done my walk for the day. Have a great day, everybody. Happy Monday. Bye. Hey PLN, it's Brian here. It's October 19th, 2021, out here for Fresh Air at 5 this morning. And this morning, as I got started, I listened to episode 188 of House of EdTech with Chris Nessie. And Chris, you bring us some things. You bring us 10 new to your podcast Chrome extensions that we should check out. And so thank you for those. I always love a good Chrome extension. You mentioned the ones from, I think, 122, where you had a few years ago done this, and there are some crossover that I use from that old other episode. Really great ones like Bitmoji, etc. But the new ones include Moat, Homey, includes a something to get. I don't know. I can't remember all of them, but that's why the show notes are there. So people go check out Chris's show notes for House of EdTech episode 188 for a full list, because I can't remember them here. Some of the Chrome extensions, Chris, that I use Screencastify on a regular basis. Fantastic. I use it even for capturing video while I am invigilating exams through Google Meet if I need to. I know I can record my video there, but this is another space to store that content. Or if we're doing like Vayon, we use Vayon to watch our computers in our computer lab, but it doesn't have a video recording feature, it just has screen capture. So this way I can turn on Screencastify, share my desktop, and put a student's screen up to be able to record what's going on their screen. So during an exam, if they're misbehaving themselves, then we can capture some video evidence of that. All right, one that I use is Clipboard History Pro, and I put it on my personal as well as on my teacher Google account Chrome browser so that I can save my clipboard history. There's nothing more annoying than copying something important, going somewhere else, and accidentally pressing Control-C or copying something else, and you're like, whoa, where'd it go? So this way, it gives me access to the past 150 or more clips that I had. Bye. One more thing for October 19th, 2021. You know, when you think about it, duct tape is fantastic. And whenever you can use duct tape in a place, it kind of just ramps it up to go, I just use duct tape. But that's not the way technology should be used. It shouldn't be used just because we can use it, but because we have an educational need for it. And on Batsheva Frankel's Overthrowing Education, and I can't remember the episode number, but it'll flash up on the screen here in a second. She has an interview with Mr. Duct Tape himself, Jake Miller, who talks about the educational integration mindset and how we need to look at a problem we have in teaching and then apply a solution to that, not the other way around. It was said in the episode that it's like going to a doctor who gives you a prescription before he even looks at you because he thinks he knows what you need. You'd never do that. You'd always want to get his opinion before you find out what his prescription is. So that's what we need to do as we are in our classrooms. Look at the problem and then work on the solution after the problem. Many of us come with loads of solutions that may or may not meet the needs of a problem, but until we identify the problem, we don't know whether we have a good solution. So Jake, thanks so much for being on Batsheva's podcast. It's super funny, as typically you would expect it to be. And the infomercial at the beginning was really great. And I need to get myself some dynamic duct tape because, can always use a boost in your classroom to make things a little bit better. Great to hear you again in another place. Talk about something I've heard you talk about much about, and through your podcast is just about you and learning a little bit more about you. So, I do follow around certain podcasters and listen to them on other podcasts because I think it's important that we get more of a story so that we can know each other better. All right, that's it for now today, people. Still out for Fresh Air at 5. Have a fabulous Tuesday. Peace out. Bye. One more thing for October 19th, 2021. Jake Miller and Batsheva Frankel mentioned it in Batsheva's podcast that she had the interview with Jake Miller. And it has to do with the Educational Podcast Network. And Jake and Batsheva and myself have podcasts that are part of the Educational Podcast Network that was started, I believe, by Mr. Chris Nessie himself. And it is a collection of podcasters that have banded together in one network to bring you content. One of the things that we do in that network is that we share bumper openings that you'll hear at the beginning of all of our podcasts or in our podcast somewhere that are about other podcasters and their podcasts. So go take a listen to those. So I've used Jake's, I've used Batsheva's bumper in my podcast a number of times. And it's interesting how we all have different ways of approaching, remembering who we have used in the past. So thanks, Batsheva. Thanks, Jake, for your contributions. And I'm going to flip a coin to see who gets to be at the top of this podcast. All right, peace out. Have a great day. That's episode 42 of Fresh Air at 5, coming out this Friday, October 22nd at midnight. Okay, bye. One last thing for October 19th, 2021. I just wrapped up Mindset Mondays that came out yesterday with George Koros on the Innovators Mindset podcast. And George brings us week 3 of his new segment called Mindset Mondays. And George, you know, this one strikes home, because this whole accountability to self compared to accountability to others, it's so easy to let self go. We let ourselves go and make sure that we're looking good for others and we're accountable to others, and we don't take care of ourselves. So this whole thing of self-care, I think, is a really important commitment that we need to make to ourselves. We need to do it for ourselves. But then, okay, you go, well, I'm just doing it for me. That's kind of selfish. Well, that selfish is important, because if we don't do it for ourselves, we're not going to be there for our families and those that are around us, our loved ones, and our colleagues and people that are around us. And we're not going to be bringing the best we can if we don't take care of ourselves. So, it's about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, this whole accountability thing. Who am I accountable to? Who do I jump to the pump for first? Is it me or is it somebody else? So, challenging to think about. Don't negotiate with yourselves on certain things. Fresh Air at 5 is one of those things that I don't negotiate with myself on, okay, very much. There are days like when I'm spent, I don't go. But that is me consciously saying, I am not going today because I don't have the energy in my tank to get out the door, or I'm too tired for that. But that's about me having a conversation with myself about what is the importance. So, awesome. Thank you, George. Appreciate the provocation to think about self and think about who we are accountable to for the things that we do. And you know what? You're not laughing anymore when I hear the Mindset Monday fairy music or the unicorn music playing. It's awesome. I appreciate it. Okay, bye. Hey PLN, it's Brian here. It's Wednesday, October 20th, 2021, and out for Fresh Air at 5, and I just took in Season 3, Episode 5. No, that's backwards. Season 5, Episode 3 of Shooks and Giff, the podcast with co-host Jen Giffen. And Jen, good morning, Jen. Nice to hear your voice. And yep, I'm out here for Fresh Air at 5, and I recall last year's opening keynote session that you did with us and a session that you did with us at the BCDLA PSA that you mentioned that you're going to be doing an opening at this coming Friday, October 22nd, which is a virtual conference. And so thankful to have you last year and great to introduce you. And this year though, Jen, I'm not going to be at that conference. I'm going to be at the provincial, the Primary and Intermediate Teachers Association conference, and I went over there to lend some tech help and to be part of that crew. And so I will miss your session, but maybe I can catch it up on the replay later. So yeah, so people, if you need some professional development this Friday, British Columbia here in Canada has our professional specialist associations have all a conference, and typically all of them are virtual. So you could go over to the BC Teachers Federation, and look for the PSAs and links to all of the conferences if you need something more. But you should go listen to Jen, because Jen's fantastic, and for $45, you're going to get Jen plus a whole lot of other engaging sessions about distributed learning and online learning and hybrid learning and ideas that you can implement in your classroom. All right, I'm going to be doing a session on Adobe Spark with the middle school and primary teachers, so I'm excited about that. But yes, okay, so this isn't about the conference. This is about Shooks and Giff, Season 5, Episode 3, and Jen, fantastic nuggets of gold in here. I like the one about the zoom in. I was thinking about how that happened years ago, but now there's a mechanism that we can use. Somebody's built an app that allows us to zoom in on pixels, etc. Happy day. Bye. One more thing for October 20th, 2021. I just listened to season 2, episode 2 of Education Today with Scott News, and he had on guest and his friend Barbara Bray, and it was great to hear them have a just down-to-earth conversation about life and how they've known each other and how they bring joy into each other's lives as friends through conferencing and just being in a professional learning network together. So important to have those people around you. And Scott, I appreciate knowing you. You know, our friendship has grown over the past 3 years of just being on Twitter together and watching each other. And it was great to be a guest on your podcast. And I've talked about your podcast on my podcast and just the connections that we've made. And, you know, as life is full and rich and there's difficulties and trying times, we need to have people around us that care deeply. So this morning, as I listened to Barbara Bray talk, she talked about growing your why and figuring out your why of why you're doing what you're doing. And to the point of, you know, you had a previous career, Barbara, as a dental hygienist that you enjoyed. And my wife, she's a dental hygienist and she enjoys her work. But, you know, would she change what she's doing to become an educator? That's not her thing. But you had that there part of you and are excited about making a difference in people's lives while you were a dental hygienist, and you figured out that that's what you want to do. That's like my story. Go listen to my story on Scott's podcast, Education Today, from back earlier last year. He had me on as a guest, and I talked about my backstory about being a chemist and about changing my mind towards education and having a second life in education, just as Scott has as well. And it's so fantastic when you figure out your why, that work is not painful. It's not arduous to go to work for the most part. There are days when it's hard, but that's because there's other things going on in life possibly that distract you from being fully engaged. Looking forward to my day today. My why, part of my why is working with little ones. I'm working with the grade 3 to 5s. We're going to be doing shapegrams with Tony Vincent, and it's going to be fantastic learning how to use a trackpad on a Chromebook with littles. Bye, Scott. Bye, Barbara. See ya. Bye. APLN October 21st, 2021. We got a 21-21 today, so that's kind of fun. Like numbers, it's kind of cool and all good. Mold Day is coming up on Saturday, so that's the 10/23 for Mold Day, and that's a chemistry reference for all those that don't understand. But yes, that's happening coming up soon. And this morning I'm out here for Fresh Air at 5, feeling invigorated. It was hard to get out of bed this morning. It's been a full week. I'm working on our executive for our conference coming up on Friday with my PETA, and putting in a few hours there, not as many as other executive members, but I'm doing my part to make this thing happen on Friday. It's going to be exciting. I'm presenting about Adobe Spark, which is my jam. It's one of my things that I'm really passionate about, and that brings us to episode 97 of the Staff Room Podcast, as Che Cheney has on co-host Lainey Rowell, and Pav has stepped aside for this one, and Che and Lainey have talked about technology under review and talking about the use of it and the hype of it and whether or not the hype is worth it. So I just said I'm presenting on Adobe Spark, and this old guy here has been presenting on Adobe Spark since Spark was born, and before it was called Adobe Voice on the iPads, and it was a video creation tool for a very simplistic video editing tool that still is very useful, but it has other parts to it. And I'm going to be talking about the graphics component. I shared a year ago, Che mentioned that I met with him and Pav, and I had a personal PD with them on a Sunday morning, and we went over Adobe Spark and how to use it. And I'm so glad to hear that you're still using it a little bit, Che. But you know, from what I heard today is that we have to not be married to something. Well, there have to be the experts in an area, and we have to be an expert in a certain area. Like Lainey said, that there are certain tools and tech that we do get at, that we are efficient at and good at, but we have to have a broad scope. Okay, I'm going to continue in a second. Hang on. One more thing for October 21, 2021, reflecting still on the Staff Room Podcast, episode 97 with Che Cheney and Lainey Rowell, and how they were talking about technology under review. And I was saying that we need to be experts. We have to have people that are good at a certain area. Like, I think I am fair, not good. There's people that are awesome at Adobe Spark work, and we can learn from each other, and paying attention to people that are better than me helps me grow in my craft. But we need to have an opportunity for our students and provide that opportunity for students to grow in a number of different tools so that we're not just staying in one tool. For your students to leave and go, oh yeah, I worked with Mr. Carpenter, and when we were there, we did Google Docs and we got really, really good at it, but that's it. That is all. And I sometimes get stuck in a certain thing, but I have my students, be eyes open and use other tools that they would like to. When we're making graphics, I have them use Google Drawings. I have them use Canva. My goodness, I just stepped into Canva myself officially as an educator. So I have an educator account, and I need to understand this other graphics program. I think I should probably get over and dig into that a little bit, because that's Che's thing and how he uses it to create graphics and does amazing work there. But the whole point is that we need to provide opportunity for exposure for our students. So technology exposure is about them being exposed. It's like going to Home Depot and walking into the tool section and you're like, whoa, that's exposure. But how do you use specific tools? How do you know which tool to get for a job? That is an important thing, critical thinking, that we need to get into. Stephanie Rowell, this is the first I've heard of you, and I will not be the last I've heard of you, because you have a podcast, something about lemonade. I think it's in the show notes. I got to go find that and take a listen to that. And thanks for being part of my learning journey this morning, Che and Lainey. My apologies, Lainey. All right, bye. One more thing later on October 21, 2021. Look at the color of those leaves back there. I love fall colors, and it's so pretty around here in the fall. So I'm out this afternoon for Fresh Air at 5 paper delivery route with my daughter, and I'm listening to the Innovators Mindset podcast. 3 questions with Josh Stamper, and Josh Stamper got to talk to George. That is such an honor, and it was the day that they recorded when his book came out, and so super great. I've got the book, Josh, at home, and I'm going to be reading it, but not right now. I don't have time, unfortunately, and George, it's such a great thing that you shout out people, and it brings joy to listen to people, talk about people, and then you go, yeah, go for it, right? So, Josh, I appreciate your story about your early self, and the advice you give your early self about don't be hesitant to ask questions, because we need to ask questions. And even as senior teachers and being in this thing for a long time, and I might look that way, but I'm only a middle-aged teacher at about 13 years of experience so far. I ask questions all the time, and it's through asking questions that we collaborate with people, and people need to be understanding that we can ask questions. So that's super great. All right, awesome, fantastic. Take a listen to Josh's story, a little bit about Josh. There's a little nugget that I didn't know about how school was going back in the early days for you, and how your teacher called you out and had you rise to the challenge. All right, talk to you guys later. Got another podcast to listen to. Okay, bye. Last thing for October 21, 2021, I just listened to episode 69 of the Ignite EdTech podcast with Craig Kemp out of Singapore, and he had on guest Mike Shunkawian. Sorry, Mike, for saying that incorrectly, but Mike is a brilliant multilingual edupreneur who has a company that does language acquisition work so that people in schools can integrate that into their curriculum and into their classroom space, and provides the tools so that that can happen. Awesome to hear your story, Mike. I appreciate that very much. It's encouraging, and I like how you have done many jobs and are continuing to push forward and innovate and make a difference in people's lives. All right, Craig, you talked about how we can set our educational expectations into our district, into the strategic plan. And that is such a great idea, that we get a senior management to buy in and pay attention to the difference that EdTech integration and learning can make in our school systems. So I'm going to talk to my buddy who's a VP of digital learning and just have him listen to this episode and see how we can do the same. We started that years ago in our district, but it didn't take hold for very long. I've got my certificate from back in the day, but I don't know how many others do. All right, we'll talk to you later. Have a fabulous day. It's a little windy out here. Gotta go. Bye. Hey PLN, it's Friday, October 22nd, 2021. I'm so fired up today. Today is Pro D Day. It's PSA Day here in British Columbia, and we get to travel around virtually because of the pandemic, that we can't physically travel, but we can travel virtually to go see our colleagues at conferences. And today I'm part of the Middle School and Primary Intermediate Teachers Association conference, and being on the executive, I have some responsibilities to help the conference go. But I'm also presenting this morning at 8:45 about Adobe Spark, and I'm so excited to share a bit of my understanding about this fabulous tool and set of tools. And I'm going to be talking about Post, which is the graphics creation tool. All right, so that's what gets me up this morning. I'm excited to be able to share my understanding and learning with others. As I'm walking this morning, I listened to the Tom Schimmer Show, episode 46. And Tom, you started out with a pretty personal story that started in 1980 and ended in 1990 about you playing professional sport. And that was very curious to me, being a Canadian kid watching Canadian football. That was back, when I was younger. And I think I remember your name. I think it does come back to me. I heard your name as an educator. And I'm like, I've heard that name before. So, it goes a long ways to do what you do and to be where you are. But yet from that story, you talked about, the fear of regret and about the fear of what if I had done something differently, what the outcome would have been. And so that's why we need to push into the things that are hard and to work through them longer, possibly, than how we're feeling about them. Steps into part 2 of your podcast on episode 46. You talked with Dr. Tina Brogan about self-care, and it was great to hear. I'm a self-care advocate. We need to take care of the teachers in the building so that we can take care of our students at the first and foremost. But if the teachers are struggling, we watch our students struggle because we're not delivering ourselves to them 100%. And then in Assessment Corner, you talked about the difference between format and method. And so that was really great to hear. Appreciate it. Have a great day, Tom. I'll talk to y'all. Bye. As my one word for 2021 is appreciate, I appreciate you giving me a listen as I've created this podcast experience for you. It's a unique Blinkist or Coles Notes version of the content I take in, like a highlight reel, so that you can hopefully find other interesting podcasts you may not have considered before. I've recorded the specific podcast episodes in the show notes for your learning convenience. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming episodes. And if you enjoy this podcast and its format, share it with someone else. Tweet about your experience or give it a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Fresh Air at 5 can also be found on Voice Ed Radio. Your voice is right here, and on the Education Podcast Network, podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. I hope you have a fantastic day and get some fresh air before the day is out, and take care of yourself because you're worth it.